Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the...
Welcome back to Frontline Rejects. Before we get started today, we'd appreciate it if you could help us out by hitting that like and subscribe button and by dropping a comment in the comment section below. And if you'd like to reach out to us directly, send us an email at frontlinerejects@gmail.com.
The bullet we're testing today is the 178 grain Hornady ELDX, which we've got loaded up for our 30-06 and will be running from 100 to 500 yards. This is the 5th time we've featured this bullet here on the channel, and if you want to see our prior tests with it, go ahead and check the description below. You'll see links in there. As always, this is a cup and core, non-bonded bullet, and we've had pretty good results with it in the past. Anyway, we're very excited to see how it's going to perform today, and we hope y'all are as well. So let's get started. Getting into our 5th test of Hornady's ELDX, which will be our final test with this bullet for the foreseeable future, we need to mention one or two things off the top. Today's bullet was actually factory loaded. We almost exclusively run hand loads when doing these tests, but in this instance, a buddy gave me 2 boxes from Hornady's precision line, and seeing as we're not wealthy or anything around here, of course we're not going to turn down handouts. Also, today's estimated impact velocities were provided using JBM ballistics software, and the reason that this will be our last video on this bullet that we've got planned is because we've completed enough videos on it to do a 5 cartridge review. And longtime viewers of the channel will have heard us mention the 5 cartridges reviews for a while now. It is something we're working on to get rolled out. We've ran into some issues trying to get a good mesh between the video format and the data that we want to be able to represent, so there's a few more issues to iron out there before those start dropping. Back to this test though, getting into the 100, we've got good mushrooming on all sides. The jacket tore back fairly consistently for a non-bonded bullet. Expansion continues to be favorable at the 200-yard mark with no real signs of jacket core separation or fragmenting, which is something we've ran into in the past with 30 cal ELDXs. 300 is very similar to the 2, great expansion ending about halfway down the bullet's shank. At 400 yards, we start to see expansion ending a bit higher up the shank as we drop down to 2135 FPS. And rounding things out at the 500, it's much the same as the 400, still maintaining very acceptable expansion at just a hair over 2,000 feet a second. Taking a look at our graphs, we've got pretty good numbers all around. Expansion starts out at 2.2 2.27 times original size at 100 yards and ends at 2.11 times original size at 500 yards. We do see a slight dip at 400 yards, but at all ranges fired, we stayed above 2 times original size, which is fantastic. In previous testing with this bullet, we've found that it still produces effective expansion exceeding 1.5 times original size at velocities just below 1800 feet per second, meaning that for this bullet in this cartridge, we should see effective expansion out to 600 yards. But more on that later. Average weight retention for a thin-jacketed non-bonded bullet was surprisingly high at 77% and fairly consistent for this bullet type at all ranges fired. Even at the earlier ranges where our velocity was still a bit up, we only lost around 29%, which is very good again for this type of bullet. I think what the factory-loaded ELDX does in this chambering is it provides a good box factory option for a hunter who wants a very accurate load that they can hunt deer and some larger game with at distances just a bit further than your standard lead soft point without having to put in the time hand loading or the money for higher end bonded bullets. It's a good all-around option that doesn't really excel in any one area but does pretty much everything pretty darn good. At the price point I usually see this factory loaded ammunition coming in at, it is economical enough that you can comfortably buy enough of it to practice regularly while being terminally effective enough for most hunters' applications. Another factor to consider is Hornady's Ford-off ballistic calculator, which anyone can download on their smartphone and provides a more accurate drop solution for anyone using a bullet which has been added to Ford-off's library. Due to its reliance on drag characteristics modeled using Doppler radar versus just a ballistic coefficient calculated at a set Mach value. So pairing the ELDX with Ford-off is a real win because it helps to increase real-world accuracy and is one of the reasons that I do like this bullet. With this particular offering, I think Hornady has done a great job of meshing grain weight with velocity through this chambering. We haven't seen any of the extreme fragmenting that we've ran into with some ELDXs in the past. So the 30-06 and similar moderate cartridges may be the crowd that the ELDXs really shine in. If I was loading for a higher powered Magnum cartridge, I would probably pick a different bullet, which I think makes sense. If I'm loading for my 28 Nosler or say a 300 Weatherby mag, I'm already spending more money on the brass and powder, so I'm probably not going to be as cost averse to spending a bit more and getting a more premium bonded core design. But if I'm going to grab my 270 or my 308 and go hunt deer, I would be perfectly happy running an ELDX. So this brings us to what is our use case for this, the 178 grain ELDX and the 30-06. Well, we have to start off with a few assumptions, and as always, that comes with a few caveats. The first being that whenever you assume something, you may get an ass out of you and me. So we'll take this with a grain of salt and keep in mind it's a very broad spectrum general recommendation. We've been told for years that we need minimum 1,500 foot-pounds of energy for elk and 1,000 foot-pounds of energy for deer at point of impact for an ethical shot. And keeping in mind again that this is one of those assumptions, but it's a decent framework to work within. Looking at our drop chart, we've got 1,000 pounds of energy out at 800 yards, but remember that we really want a minimum impact velocity of 1,800 for proper expansion with this bullet, which means we need to find the point along the trajectory where both those values are satisfied. At 600 yards, we're above 1,800 feet per second, and we've got 1,395 foot-pounds of energy, so that gives us our max range I'd comfortably shoot a deer out to with this bullet in this chambering. We have to take a step back for elk because we want to be above 1,500 foot-pounds, so that gives us 500 yards where we've got 1,588 foot-pounds of energy. Summarizing all this, we've got 0 to 600 yards for medium-sized game like deer and antelope, and 0 to 500 yards for larger game like elk and black bear. If you got something out of today's content, consider helping us out with a like, and if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing, consider subscribing. And if you've got any experience with this bullet, or you'd just like to weigh in on the conversation, drop your comments in the box below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.